Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. I want to thank you for joining us as we continue to celebrate all the people who make this state such a great place to live, work, and play. I want to thank you for joining us as I give you an update from time to time. The numbers for the show continue to improve and get better. A lot of engagement around our show. We're actually beginning to work harder to get segments and clips from our video up onto the X site for SuperTalk Mississippi. And, there's a lot of encumbrances when you're on Facebook or Instagram, even YouTube for that matter. A lot of encumbrances. In order for you to get the kind of engagement that you would like to get, even though we get a lot of engagement, you got to pay for it. They want to force you to boost it. And I don't know if it's because SuperTalk is has some conservative shows. I wouldn't call it a conservative radio program, but it's got some conservative shows. That there is a built-in sort of penalty in the algorithm for that reason. I believe there is. I mean, obviously, I've had many conversations about that. I'm pretty confident there is. However, when you're on X, there aren't encumbrances like that. X has really kind of opened it up. I'll give you an example. We posted a video the other day. Within a very short period of time on Facebook, it had about 100 views. Used to, we would have had 500 views. We posted on X, and in a much lesser point of time, I would say within 20 minutes, 853 views. So the difference is quite incredible. And but I want to thank you. As I often say, radio is still king. A lot of you are listening as we speak, either on supertalk.fm or on your radio or in your car. You're listening that way, and we really appreciate it. We have so many awesome shows over the past 7 days and some great ones planned ahead. We don't have a shortage of people to have on this show, but we're always looking for interesting people. So if you know someone, let us know. Hey, listen, I'm thrilled now, and don't have anything to share as far as quotes are concerned, because I actually have something I'm going to share during this conversation that I think will be kind of a motivating factor for you, especially if you're overthinking things. We're going to talk about that now. But before we go any further, I want to welcome my friend Robbie D'Angelo, who's he's described himself as a human optimization coach. He's actually in the dating scene these days. He's doing some interesting work there, consulting with people. But, we enjoy checking in with Robbie from time to time. And let me, without any further ado, welcome Robbie back to the Ricky Matthews Show. How you doing, Robbie?
Ricky, I am fantastic, man. I'm glad to be here. It's blessing to be here, and I'm excited for this conversation.
Well, listen, I'm gonna let the listeners know that you and I talked about a year or longer ago about an infection that you had in your thigh, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. That doesn't sound right. I think you were able to make it go away, or at least put it at bay. And then it raised its ugly head in a very significant way, and it ended up causing you to have multiple stays in the hospital and lots of you had surgery. Why don't you bring our listeners up to speed on what you've been through over the last few months?
Yeah, it's been fun. I've spent 3 out of the last 7 weeks in the hospital, 3 surgeries, and a whole round of, and I've literally been on antibiotics since December. And it was an infection that came back after 2 years, and the doctors couldn't figure out why. They also couldn't figure out what the infection actually was, because everything they would throw at it wasn't working. And every time I'd go to the hospital and they would clean it out and send me home on antibiotics, it would just get worse. So it was an interesting time, because I was struggling with that, and the antibiotics were wreaking havoc on my body. I'm still dealing with it, still dealing with fatigue and brain fog and all the side effects of the severe antibiotics. I have a PICC line in my arm right now, where I'm on IV antibiotics for 7 hours a day. So it's been interesting, but hopefully now that we've identified what's actually going on, the correct antibiotics, we're on, the other side, we're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, as Dr. Conger has said to Colony many times, one of the real challenges they had during COVID was that people would get infections and not go get them dealt with. And what happens when they get really bad, if you don't get in there and clean it out, and you don't find out exactly what type of infection it is, it's hard to treat it properly. And some people were waiting too long and losing limbs because of it. I have a cousin that dealt with it. has dealt with it for over a year. He ended up getting septic from it, ended up in the ICU, and I think they're finally on it the way they need to be on it. But this is very dangerous what you're telling us about.
It is. And what was really interesting about what I was going through was all my blood work was perfect. I wasn't running a fever. Other than some inflammation that was going on in my thigh, you would never know that I was dealing with an infection. And even when I was in the hospital and all the doctors were like, you're completely healthy. Like with this infection, it was actually I think it was like a 23 centimeter abscess. So almost the entire length of my thigh. With an abscess that big, normally you're running a fever, your body's like showing signs it's fighting an infection. And I never once ran a fever. Even my white blood count was normal. So it was really weird to be having this bad of infection with no other symptoms. And that really stumped the doctors.
Wow. I bet they scared you along the way too.
Yeah, when you have all the doctors using that phrase, I don't know, that definitely scares you because you're like, hey man, like you're the doctor, you're supposed to be fixing this. And they're like, I don't know, we'll try this.
Wow, I'm so sorry to hear that you've been through that. For someone who's so in touch with their body,
yeah,
and have worked so hard to inspire others, there'll be some great lessons about resilience and overcoming adversity that you teach about all the time. It's not your first time to overcome adversity, but there'll be some great lessons in all of this that you'll be able to use in how you coach other people.
Absolutely. One of my mentors was joking with me the other day. So when I was a college football All-American, the All-American list that I made was Mark May's Mayday All-American team. And it's the guys that played with like the most pain and injury through the season and still performed well. And he goes, I wonder if Mark May would still put you on his list after all this. You know, you're still showing those same attributes. I'm like, yeah, man, I'm a fighter. That's, what my dad taught me to be growing up. But speaking of lessons learned through this, one of the biggest lessons I've learned through this is, we're proactive and we do all these things for our health, but some things you just don't have control over.
Yeah.
And, when those things come up, how do you handle those things that you don't have control over? You don't have a lot of insight on how to get on the other side of it. And that patience was probably one of the biggest things that I had to really step into during this, patience and trust, because I couldn't just like put my hands on the problem and fix it. I had to like just keep trusting doctors and keep trusting the process and have patience through this. I'm still having to have patience. I mean, I've got another couple of weeks of IV antibiotics and another month of oral antibiotics. So, 6 more weeks before I can even start healing my body on the inside. So that patience thing has really been a good test through all this.
Well, Robbie, you've always said that good health, physical and mental health, good health is where your determination and desires and goals, your internal framework kind of intersects with your efforts physically to get in shape and to be healthy. And you can't really do one without the other. I mean, you have to get those in alignment. I would think that what you are going through now, that all the stuff that you did prior to this really helps you say, okay, this is my opportunity to coach myself through a very difficult time.
It absolutely is. I mean, with what I'm dealing with right now, I'm a high performance coach. I teach people how to perform at higher levels than they thought possible. And now I'm dealing with severe fatigue. Even like my infectious disease doctor told me that's like one of the bad side effects of this strong of antibiotics. And then the brain fog, and even your neurochemistry is totally out of whack when your gut microbiome's messed up. So I don't have the serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin right now going through my brain. And so I'm having to do all these other things like heal my gut, even as I'm going through this, and probiotics, prebiotics, and fiber, taking brain supplements even more than I normally would to help me function through the day and have energy. So I'm having to practice what I preach almost in overdrive right now. And I'll say this too. One of the things that the doctors even said to me was, because you're so healthy and because you take care of your body, that's why you've been able to fight this like you have. And that's why you're not having this happen to you as bad as if you were unhealthy.
Yeah.
So I'm
yeah.
completely thankful that I was healthy going into this, because I can only imagine what this would have looked like if I would have been unhealthy and then all this infection started popping up.
Yeah. I mean, you're telling the story of my cousin who went into his situation not healthy. And it just ravaged him. Now, look, the good news is I think he's turned the corner. At least we hope he has. But it's been really tough. I probably pushed him into a septic scenario more than the average person, because his body was not in a good position to be able to handle the kind of infection that he was dealing with. When we come back on the other side, though, I think this is such a kind of a interesting. I appreciate you sharing that, Robbie. It's a good way to kind of start. I want to shift gears a little bit, because what happens is we have a tendency to overthink about everything. And I came across something the other day about that. I want to share with you and see what your thoughts are about it. We'll see y'all after the other side. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. I have my friend Robbie D'Angelo, who just got finished telling a pretty interesting story about a challenge he has with an infection in his thigh that led to multiple surgeries and lots of antibiotics, and hopefully he's on the other side of all that. But Robbie is a coach, and by the way, I wanted to ask you, Robbie, before we go any further, I know through all these trials and tribulations it's been difficult, but have you been able to continue to do coaching throughout all of this?
Yeah, I mean, every time I checked into the hospital, I packed a go bag, and I was like literally bringing my laptop into the hospital with me, because I was fighting this infection, but I felt fine the entire time. So yeah, I wasn't taking Zoom calls while I was in the hospital bed, but just kind of around that, I was working, and all my clients are really understanding about all that, and I was still able to take care of them, even though just kind of working around the schedule of surgeries and everything else that was going on. So it was hectic and crazy, but we managed to fight through it.
Well, listen, I came across something the other day that I find to be really powerful. And, every time that you and I spend some time together, we try to create some lessons for listeners we at least give them something to think about. And this particular thing that I'm going to share is something that was on an Instagram page called Income Fact. There's a lot of self-help stuff in there, a lot about how to set goals and whatever. But in this particular one, the headline was "Overthinking is the biggest cause of unhappiness." Now, as a former CEO, I know a lot about what overthinking looks like. At one point in my career, just before I retired, I had 2,000 employees. So I understand what a large organization looks like and what overthinking can look like. But I don't care if you manage a major corporation or whether you manage a household. Everyone has some aspect of overthinking in their lives. And so here are 8 ways you can beat overthinking. And what we'll do, we're going to just take them one at a time and talk through them. And the first one, what's interesting, in your case, Robbie, it dang sure doesn't apply, because it says the first thing is the problem is rarely the problem. Now, in your case, you knew what the problem was and you could deal with it, the physical thing. But what they're saying here is that 99% of the harm is caused in your head by you and your thoughts. 1% of the harm is caused by reality, what actually happens in the outcome. Most of the time, the problem isn't the problem. The way you think about the problem is. You've heard that before, haven't you?
There's a Stoic quote that I absolutely love, and it says, "We suffer much more in imagination than we do in reality." And so many of my clients that it's funny because this has come up a lot lately. We go into a conflict or a potential problem or just something out of our comfort zone, and we start making this story in our head of how bad it's going to be, and we start fear casting, and our brain goes into the future, and it's temporal dislocation is really what it is. Our brain goes into the future and starts creating all these stories. All those stories are not based in truth. They're just based past that you're projecting into the future. And 99% of that's not going to happen. And yes, there are ways to strategically think through problems, but the problem, and there's actually research around this, it's funny you bring this up. There was a new study come out this past month. Worrying about a problem is 10 times worse than the actual negative outcome of a bad decision.
Yeah.
So many people, they struggle with making that decision when oftentimes you just make the decision and do it. Dealing with the problem of a bad decision is still better for you than worrying and the regret of not making a decision.
Wow. Well, we're talking about 8 ways you can beat overthinking. And the first one was the problem is rarely the problem. The second one I find powerful, and I think it's something that everyone has to deal with at some point during their day, their week, their lives. And it says avoid self-rejection. And here's what it said about it. Don't think you deserve that opportunity. Apply for it anyway. Don't think your article is good enough. Publish it anyway. Don't think they'll reply to your email. Send it anyway. Never overthink yourself into self-rejection. Gosh, that's true. You know, what I found is I had the most success in my career when I was feeling the most vulnerable, when I was doing the things that other people would not do, when I was in a level of ambiguity that others would collapse with. That's when I had the most success in my life. Self-rejection, in other words, not taking that step, you know, the fear of ambiguity or the fear of being out there taking risks that others won't take, in a lot of cases stop people from actually taking the step. And so I bet you often comment to people, do it, take that step.
Yeah, Wayne Gretzky said you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And a lot of times, because of maybe some past trauma or some times we've been rejected in the past, or just some stories of like people that told us like, hey, you'll never be able to do that, negative people in your life, we don't take those clear opportunities that are in front of us. And when you look at the book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying, one of the regrets of people on their deathbed is, I wish I would have gone for it more. Yeah. And what you're talking about and what you're talking about in your career was those times when you stretched your comfort zone and you said, I'm going to lean into this fear. I'm going to lean into my potential, is where you discovered your potential. Yet so many of us let fear stop us from doing that. And the problem with that is, it's that age-old cliche, you're either going to live in fear or you're going to live in faith. And the more you step into faith of saying, I don't know the outcome, but I'm going to give it 100%. I'm not going to live with the regret of just not even trying. Yeah, you're going to make mistakes. And mistakes aren't the end of the world. Look, the funny expression I use with so many people is like, are you going to die? Like, is this going to kill you? No? Well, then do it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, if you're not going to die and you're not going to go bankrupt, go and try it. It's not that scary. And once you get into it, you realize like, oh, it really isn't that bad.
No, listen, I tell you, and all those, that's all so true. And I can relate to everything you just said. In my early 30s, when I was at the Sun Herald, Roland got a call about the possibility of me joining what they call the re-engineering team for Knight Ridder. 26,000 employees, 31 companies. We were a subsidiary of that company. And Roland came to me and said, do you want to do it? What it means is that you're going to have to commute to Miami for an extended period of time. And then Lord knows where it goes from there. And I went home and talked to Ann about it. And I said, I don't know that I'll ever be a publisher or be president of the company, but if I don't take this opportunity, I may never get that chance, because in a company this big with that many employees, with only 31 subsidiaries that you have the opportunity to be CEO of, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to say yes to these opportunities, and I got to be willing to take the risk. So I chose to do it. I flew over a 1.5 year period, 650,000 frequent flyer miles. I commuted to Miami, first to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a week for 6.5 months, and then to Miami for a 1.5 years after that. At one point, I was going 52 out of 53 weeks. But what I got the opportunity to learn during that time, Robbie, was I got to work with some of the best consultants in the industry as it relates to doing corporate change efforts. And what I came to appreciate is that leadership is about having a vision. Now, if my CEO and the chairman of the board And they did. They articulated a vision about what the risks for our company would be going forward, internet, et cetera. And they also said, okay, this is the kind of company that we want to build. I bought into that, lock, stock, and barrel. So I got the vision and understood the most important part of being a leader is actually painting a picture of where you want to go. And then through the consultants, I learned about how to lead a massive change effort, that involved a lot of people. How do you lead a massive change effort? How do you bring the best and brightest of the company together and lead them through a process that will get you a plan that says, okay, here's some of the innovation we need to do. Here's some of the steps we need to do. We're going to re-engineer this. We're going to look at where we are now, where we want to go, and we're going to figure out what are the transition plans to help us reach that articulated vision that the president and CEO of our company articulated. But it meant a lot of learning. And at first I felt like a fish out of water, to be honest with you. The first meeting in Boston, I was like, what the hell am I doing here? And then as I've hung in there longer, I realized that I can hang with some. You had Harvard graduates and Yale graduates and smart people around me. But I ended up, recognizing that, it's all a matter of learning and getting confident with the process. And it was a big risk. That led to other big risk and more big risk. My whole career from that point forward was a change agent and taking big risks. But I was rewarded greatly for doing it. And I wouldn't trade anything. And it helps. You know what? It helps me helped me when Katrina hit, understanding how to manage a big effort like that. And when they led the oil recovery efforts for Governor Riley, had over 1,000 people involved in that. Helped me understand how to do that. I still use it today when I'm focused on community issues, matters of public trust and whatever. So I was so fortunate to develop those skills. They made me a better leader no matter where I was in my life. When we come back on the other side, we're going to continue our conversation with Robbie D'Angelo and continue to talk about how we overthink about stuff. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're talking with Robbie D'Angelo about 8 ways you can beat overthinking. And, the first one that we shared was the problem is rarely the problem. The second was is avoid self-rejection. He made a point actually during the break that Richard Branson once said that if you don't know how to do something, say yes anyway and figure it out. But that's good advice, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I mean, it's been most of my professional career is I'll just say yes and figure it out. But a lot of times we just talked about, we had that fear around saying yes. And like, what if I don't know how to do this? Well, how many things have you done in your life that you once didn't know how to do?
Yeah.
It's that most everything, from changing a tire to cooking to just really anything you've ever done in your life. The career you're in right now, you once didn't know how to do the career you're in, but then you got into it, you learned, and you got better at it. It's just so many things that are outside of our comfort zone we don't have that same mindset about.
Okay, we're talking about ways to overcome overthinking. This is a really good one. I could relate to this one big time. And it's the third one. It says silence and time. It says the truth is most problems aren't solved with more thinking. They're solved with less thinking. You'll find most of the answers you're looking for in silence, in time banned with a clear mind. If you can't solve a problem, stop trying to. That's really good advice, man. I mean, just to sit peacefully and thoughtfully and have a clear mind. We don't do enough of that, do we?
Oh, you mean prayer and meditation?
Yes.
Actually, clearing out the craziness that's in your brain and thinking through a problem in a logical, non-emotional state. For a lot of the clients I've worked with and working through like a really tough problem or a challenge they're having in their life, a lot of times when you're in this chaos energy in your brain, there's like 9 million thoughts just weaving their way in and out of your thoughts. And it's really hard to come up with a conclusion when you can just slow down and take a step back. Oftentimes, like go for a walk or go change your state, do something other than what you're doing right now. Then the answer actually comes to you. That's why you've always heard the funny thing about people always have like great ideas in the shower. Well, why is that? It's because you don't have a phone in your hand. It's because you're not watching TV. It's because there's not a lot of noise. It's just you naked in the shower. So
Yeah.
you're cutting out all the noise and you're tuning into signal, and that's where the answers really are.
The fourth one's another really good one, and it says, an important question. When you start criticizing yourself for past mistakes or seeing disaster around every corner, ask yourself, is there anything I can do right now to change the past or to positively influence the future? If the answer is yes, do it, take action. If the answer is no, be at peace, let it go. You have to take action or let it go. Everything else is self-harm. Boy, is that good advice.
This goes back to locus of control, which you and I have talked about before. And for overthinkers, this is one of the biggest action steps you can take, is to literally, when you're thinking through a problem, make a list of all the things that are outside your control and a list of things that are inside of your control. And then just take action on the things that are inside of your control, because all these things, you're literally wasting brain power because there's nothing you can do about it. You might have some influence over those things, but it's in the things you can't control. Those are the actions you actually need to take. So it's making a list to kind of separate those two things to really concentrate on, okay, this is what I need to be doing. Let me go all in on that. And that's how I'm going to get out of this.
Listen, the fifth one is one that you and I talked about before. I've talked about it before. It's very powerful. It seems in some ways obvious, but we don't reflect on it enough. And it is this, the power of now. You're not going to overthink your way to a better future. You're not going to overthink your way to a better past. All you have is now. And what you do with now can make right of your past or make good of the future. Make peace with yesterday, let go of tomorrow, grab hold of now. Gosh, is that powerful advice or what?
It's the only power you do have. The only power you have is in the next decision you make. And a lot of overthinking is either we're thinking too much about the past and projecting into our future, or we're just thinking too much about like all the what ifs of the future. So it's that term that we used earlier, temporal dislocation. Our brain is everywhere else but here right now. And the more we can come to right here, right now, and you've heard me ask this question before, what's the smallest thing I can do right now to create a win? And then go execute. Yeah. And then once you do that, just ask yourself that question again, because that smallest thing you can do right now is all that matters. You can't change the past. You can only influence the future. All we can do is make a decision right now. So what is that next best decision?
And listen, we had a great conversation with Ashley Edwards the other day. He's a very thoughtful guy, the former CEO of the Gut Coast Business Council, and someone I enjoy touching base with. He's just a very cerebral dude, one of the best wordsmiths I've met, and I've met some good ones. But he made a point about truth. He said that truth before used to be objective. Truth was truth. It was a fact. You could go do that. But because of social media and misinformation and all the stuff that we deal with today, you don't know what sources to trust, and some sources you trust end up not being trustable. But he's saying your truth and my truth and that guy over there's truth is a different truth. That's the world we're in today. So it goes to this number 6, and it says this: fact check your thoughts. Your thoughts will create scenarios in your mind that reflects your insecurities, fears, and worries. So it's important to always fact check your own thoughts before accepting them, because in highly emotional situations, your thoughts will tell you stories that aren't true. Fact check yourself. Woo, that's a good one.
Separate truth from fiction. It's something that it's really called reframing, is an exercise I do with my clients when they're really struggling with moving forward, or a fear, or it's like a story they're telling themselves. Okay, take out a pen and paper and separate what's a story versus what's the actual truth. Like, what evidence do I have that this story is actually going to be true? And a lot of times that story you're telling yourself is based on zero evidence. So what evidence do I actually have? Now let me make a decision based on the truth of that evidence, not just some theoretical story that I'm conjuring up in my brain that might never even happen.
That's powerful, for sure. Hey, we're talking about these 8 things that will help people stop overthinking. It came out actually on a page on Instagram called Income Fact. But it's just got a lot of self-help stuff. But this one was really powerful, and it really applies to So many of us. The seventh one is this: acceptance is peace. No amount of anxiety will change your future. No amount of regret will change your past. Peace is found in acceptance. Accept imperfection, accept uncertainty, accept the uncontrollable. You don't have to understand, tolerate, or even forget something, but if you want peace, you must accept it. Wow. That's a good one, bud.
That's what I just had to go through, is accepting the current season I'm in and understanding, hey, I'm not going to be my best right now. I'm not going to be able to perform right now. And it's so true. And I heard a preacher say one time, work, but don't worry, because worry don't work.
Yeah.
And I love that expression because it's true. Worry does not accomplish anything. Strategic thinking does, where you're actually like looking for a solution. But what I think it was Teddy Roosevelt that said complaining about a problem without providing a solution is just called, I'm having a brain fart right now. It's just called complaining, I think.
Yeah.
But it's so many times like we're in a problem and all we want to do is just like worry about it. But what does that actually solve? Like, let's actually come up with a solution and go execute that so we can stop worrying. Isn't that the point? We want to stop worrying. So how do you do that? You actually got to solve the problem.
Hey, listen, I've had on my show and I've talked many times with this young woman. Her name is Emma Benoit, and she is a suicide attempt survivor. She did major damage to her spinal cord. When she shot herself, she had damage to her carotid that caused some issues with her brain. But she's coming back. She's working through it, and now she's inspiring people all over the United States. And one of the things she talked about was toxic positivity. That because of the culture we're in today, where people would just say it's going to be okay, or that's no big deal, we'll move on, or the role that social media plays in creating this need to always be something or somebody you're not, that we end up creating these facades about ourselves, and what the sort of public face that we're putting on starts to differ greatly from what we're feeling on the inside. And what this whole notion of accept and peace, accept the imperfection, accept the uncertainty, accept the uncontrollable, Emma would give that a big thumbs up to say she wished she would have done that early in her life. And she would encourage anyone, no matter what your age, to really think about acceptance as peace, because it led to just a terrible thing. In fact, the moment she attempted suicide, Robbie, she regretted it. And she was so happy she wasn't successful. Her goal was not to ultimately kill herself. She was trying to relieve the pain on others and herself, and it was very complicated. But now she sees what the situation was, and it does boil down to something she calls toxic positivity. When we get back on the other side, though, I want to see your thoughts about accepting peace and toxic positivity, and then we'll listen to the last one. We'll see you after this break as we continue our conversation about how to stop overthinking with my friend Robbie D'Angelo. We'll see you after this break. Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show, or welcome back from the Citizens Bank studio. I was telling Robbie during the break that when we do shows like this, I get a lot of good feedback from people. It hits people in different ways, but this one's a good one as we go through these 8 things you can think about to stop overthinking. And it came from a Instagram page called Income Fact, and it's just really good stuff. Robbie and I have enjoyed going through this. But when we went to break, there we're talking about acceptance as peace. Accept the imperfection. Accept uncertainty. Accept uncontrollable. Peace is found in acceptance, and this whole notion of how that sort of contrasts with this toxic positivity world that we're in today. What's your thoughts about that?
So you absolutely should accept where you're at and accept the current season you're in, and accept, for a lot of people, accepting is realizing how much control you don't have over so many things that you wish you did have control over. But the other side of that, toxic positivity, where I find such a problem with this whole positive movement we're having right now, is a lot of people use the positive movement as a justification for their actions. or a justification for their crappy decision or their bad behavior. Well, this is what I felt like, or this is just who I am, or this is how I was made. I'm like, no, you made a bad decision. Like, why are we blaming this? Oh, well, you're enough just like you are. Well, maybe you're not. Maybe you need to work on your communication. Maybe you need to work through some of this past trauma. It's what we're doing is we're basically giving people an easy out to saying, oh, well, you're fine just the way you are. And, even the Bible teaches like we're not. Like, that's why we have to constantly work on ourselves. And that's the whole point of sin, is to constantly work on ourselves to become better versions of ourselves. Constantly seek wisdom is actually in the Bible. So there's a lot of toxic positivity out there right now where, the whole trophy generation of everyone gets a trophy and everyone's good enough just as they are. And I hate to say it, but in meritocracy, that's not the way this really works. And here's the deal. It's a truth. You can either accept the truth and overcome it, or let it crush you. And please don't let it crush you.
Yeah, what Emma would say is that people, when she would have some difficulties, people would just say to her, it's going to be okay. This will pass. And not really appreciate that underneath it was something she was needing to accept.
She needed to work on. She needed
other people to accept it too,
Yeah. Absolutely. So, you got to work through this stuff, and you got to have like a support system to help you get through this stuff. So you're going to be fine. Oh, it's his fault, or it's her fault, or you're a good person just the way you are. Like, yeah, I appreciate your kind words, but that's not really helping me right now, and I need the help.
Yeah, that's such a powerful statement, and I hope people hear that and will reach out for help, and don't let people say it's just going to pass by. Maybe something you really need to process. And the last one is really sums up everything that you and I have talked about for the last 4 years. Number 8, health starts in your mind. You can go to the gym, eat healthy, do yoga, drink water, take vitamins, but you don't directly confront the negativity in your thoughts, you will never truly be healthy. Our health isn't measured on scales, by the size of our muscles, or by the width of our waist. True health is measured by the quality of our thoughts and the peacefulness of our mind. Health starts in your mind. Wow.
So I'm going to agree and disagree with that statement. I do agree. The only health that matters is the brain and like your mindset. And you said the word. I love the word peace, because it's what so many of us are after right now. But the more research I do and the more I work with clients, so this isn't just coming from theory, this is coming from actual real world evidence. A lot of times it starts in the body. And that could be a breathing practice. That could be you going to get sunlight, you moving your body, you going into a workout. And there's actually some research now proving that getting a really good workout is actually better for you than maybe an extra hour of sleep. So a physical state change is the path to changing your mental state. But yes, you do have to actually work on your mental state too. You can't just do the physical, because that is where a lot of people get that wrong. It has to be both. It's not an either or situation. You can't just do one or the other and hope everything works out. No, you have to actually do the mental and the physical.
I agree completely. What got me about this one, and I get the contrast that you're building. I see this agreeing greatly with what you're saying, and because the key word here is it starts in your mind. And so you got to get your head right before you can go and take those steps and visit the gym. Because what happens for me, and why I go to the gym and why I go run and do intermittent fasting and the things that I do, is because it's not what I necessarily see when I look in the mirror. Although at my age, I'm glad I see what I see. It's how I feel about that. And when I'm not doing it, mentally, I'm not right. And so when I connect the two dots together, it's all better. But truthfully, I wouldn't go do those things if it didn't start in my head first. I've got to have my head right to go do it. And that's the point. So I think it agrees. We're kind of running out of time. Final thought, buddy. We got about 45 seconds.
Look, guys, everything we've talked about today is really, you're just one decision away from a completely different life. And you have the power to make that decision. Do not feel helpless and do not feel like it's outside of your power. That is completely within your power to make that decision. make that decision and then take action. I promise you, it's something you won't regret.
Make peace with yesterday, let tomorrow go. Grab hold of now. Now's the moment. Anyway, great conversation, my friend. Hope you get better soon.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. It's been a blessing being with you.
You bet. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.